Chica hummed softly in the kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the curtains of their Lagos apartment. The smell of frying eggs and steaming bread filled the room. She moved gracefully from the stove to the counter, preparing breakfast with care, unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing in the same space. Emeka sat at the dining table, phone in hand, his fingers dancing over the screen. Chica noticed the occasional smirk on his face but thought little of it. Maybe he had received good news. She placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him and smiled. "Breakfast is ready," she said cheerfully, hoping to start the day on a happy note. He looked up briefly, a flicker of guilt crossing his face, but quickly replaced it with a cold, distant expression. Then, almost casually, he said, "Chica, I'm leaving you. Tari, she can give me more than you ever could." Time seemed to freeze for Chica. The knife in her hand trembled slightly as she set it down. Her heart pounded in her chest, and a heavy silence filled the room. She wanted to scream, to beg, to cry, but she didn't. Instead, she took a deep breath and nodded. Her eyes glistened, but she held herself upright, refusing to let the pain show fully. "I understand," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Chica's mind raced, but her spirit remained unbroken. She had loved deeply, and yes, she was heartbroken, but she would not let this betrayal steal her dignity. Not today, not ever. She turned back to the stove, focusing on the simple rhythm of chopping and stirring, silently vowing that her life, her happiness, and her strength would no longer depend on anyone else's choices. Her tears fell quietly, unseen, but her resolve shone brightly, a quiet fire that nothing could extinguish. The morning after Emeka left, the apartment felt empty, cold, and strange. Chica sat on the edge of their bed, surrounded by the faint smell of breakfast she had prepared the day before, now untouched. The house that once felt warm with laughter now seemed hollow. Every corner held a memory of shared jokes, late-night talks, and dreams whispered quietly to each other. But all of it had vanished in a single moment. Friends and family came by, some with awkward smiles, others with thinly veiled pity. "I'm so sorry, Chica," they said, shaking their heads. Some whispered behind their hands, "Poor thing, losing him like that." Chica nodded politely, smiling when she could, but inside she burned, not with anger, but with a strange, heavy sadness mixed with a rising fire of determination. They didn't understand that heartbreak would not break her completely. She began packing her small belongings, each item a reminder of the life she had built with her own hands. Her favorite apron, the old recipe book, the tiny potted plant she had nurtured for months, they all went into a worn suitcase. She wrapped each carefully, as if preserving pieces of her dignity and strength. Walking through the house one last time, Chica's eyes lingered on the places she had invested her love and energy. The living room where she had laughed with Emeka, the kitchen where she had cooked countless meals hoping to make a home, even the balcony where they had watched the sunset together. All of it now belonged to memories, not to her present. Outside, the city moved on without pause. Lagos buzzed with life, indifferent to her pain. Chica took a deep breath, feeling the weight of solitude settle on her shoulders. But with that same breath came clarity. She had relied on love once, and it had left her. She would rely on herself now. She walked away from the apartment, keys in hand, heart heavy but mind sharp. Every step felt like shedding a layer of her old life, every movement a quiet promise. Never again would she let someone else define her worth or control her happiness. The whispers of friends and family faded behind her. Their judgment, their pity, they no longer mattered. As she stepped into the bustling streets of Lagos, Chica's chest swelled with a mixture of grief and courage. She had lost a husband, a home, and what many called security, but she had gained herself, and in that, she discovered a strength far greater than any comfort someone else could offer. She vowed silently, firmly to rise again, to build her life from her own hands, and to never let anyone else have the power to diminish her spirit. For the first time in weeks, Chica smiled, not a fragile, polite smile, but a quiet, determined one. She was leaving behind more than a house. She was leaving behind a chapter of dependence. Ahead of her was uncertainty, yes, but also freedom, and the chance to become someone unstoppable. Chica's new apartment in Victoria Island was tiny, barely enough for a bed, a small kitchenette, and a corner for her few belongings. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The walls were plain, the floor cold under her feet, and the sink had a slow drip that made her flinch every time she turned on the tap. Yet, for the first time in weeks, Chica felt a spark of hope. This small space was where she would begin again, where she would turn her pain into purpose. She cleared a corner for her cooking, placing a small gas stove, a few pots and pans, and the few ingredients she could afford. She remembered the recipes she had perfected over the years. Jollof rice that friends raved about, suya seasoned just right, puff that melted in your mouth. She started taking small orders from neighbors, friends of friends, anyone willing to try her food. Every dish she prepared was with care, love, and an unspoken promise to herself. She would rise again. But life in the building wasn't easy. Some neighbors whispered as she carried trays up and down the stairs. "Look at her," one said, shaking her head. "From a big house to this tiny flat, she has really fallen." Others snickered openly when they passed her in the hallway, their eyes full of judgment. Chica heard it all, felt it all, but she refused to let their opinions shake her. Each whisper, each laugh, only made her more determined. She would prove them wrong not by words but by action. She spent long hours cooking, cleaning, and delivering orders. Sweat dripped down her back as she stirred pots late into the night, but she didn't stop. She experimented with her recipes, perfecting flavors, learning how to present each dish beautifully. Even when a delivery went wrong or a customer complained, she listened, adapted, and tried again. Her dreams were small at first, but they burned bright, fueled by the memory of the life she had lost and the life she was determined to build. Slowly, people began to notice. The aroma of her jollof rice and suya wafted down the hallways, tempting even the skeptics. A few neighbors who had whispered now asked for a taste, their expressions shifting from mockery to surprise. Chica smiled politely, serving each plate with quiet confidence. She knew this was just the beginning. Each day, as she closed her small kitchen for the night, Chica felt a sense of pride that no one could take away. She was starting over from nothing, and it was hard, yes, but it was hers. Every order she packed, every smile she received from a satisfied customer, reminded her that she was capable. That small flat in Victoria Island, once a symbol of her loss, was now the birthplace of her comeback, a place where heartbreak transformed into hope, and determination would pave the path to something much bigger. Tari's life seemed like a dream, or at least that's what she wanted everyone to believe. Every weekend, she posted pictures online, showing off her latest designer bag, her sparkling new car, or cocktails at exclusive Lagos rooftop lounges. Friends would comment, praising her taste, her style, her luck in life. Tari thrived on the attention, on the image of a perfect, glamorous life that she believed made her untouchable. At parties, she never missed a chance to bring up Chica, the woman Emika had left behind. "Can you believe she's still cooking in that tiny little kitchen?" Tari would say with a laugh, twirling her designer bracelet. "How pathetic. I can't even imagine surviving like that." The room would giggle politely, some whispering in agreement. Tari loved to see the pity in their eyes, the subtle judgment, the way they compared Chica's small beginnings to her own flashy lifestyle. But Chica didn't know most of this. She was too busy rising from the ashes of her heartbreak, too focused on the meals she was preparing, the flavors she was perfecting, and the customers she was slowly winning over. Every insult, every snide remark, every whisper of mockery from Tari and her social circle reached her ears indirectly, but she chose not to react. Instead, she channeled every ounce of hurt into her work. Late at night, after deliveries were done and her small kitchen was quiet, Chica experimented with new recipes. She adjusted spices, tested different cooking techniques, and thought about presentation, how a simple dish could feel like a feast, how a small kitchen could create something unforgettable. Her neighbors might see her as struggling, but she knew the struggle was temporary. What she was building inside those four walls was bigger than anyone could understand. Meanwhile, Tari continued her public displays of wealth, posting pictures of her new luxury car beside a sparkling pool, sipping champagne with friends who admired her. Yet behind the smiles, there was a subtle unease. Something about the ease with which Chica seemed to survive, despite ridicule and loss, gnawed at her. Tari tried to ignore it, but deep down, she felt a flicker of worry, a tiny spark that perhaps Chica's journey was far from over. Chica, however, remained untouched by arrogance or fear. She didn't need anyone to validate her worth. She focused on her craft, on building something real, something lasting. And while Tari spent her days flaunting what she could borrow or buy, Chica was quietly creating her empire, one delicious plate at a time. The contrast was stark, and in the long run, it was Chica's patience, skill, and humility that would shine the brightest. Long after Tari's arrogance faded into whispers of envy and regret, the more Tari tried to mock her, the stronger Chica became, proving that true strength doesn't come from what you show the world. It comes from what you build quietly, without needing anyone's applause. One afternoon, as Chica was delivering a tray of jollof rice and suya to a small gathering, she didn't notice the young man filming the bustling street outside her apartment. He was a popular Lagos influencer, always on the hunt for fresh stories and hidden gems. The aroma of Chica's food caught his attention first. Curious, he stopped and asked for a taste. One bite of her perfectly seasoned jollof, one taste of the spicy suya, and he was hooked. "People need to know about this," he said, filming the small kitchen and Chica herself. Within hours, he posted a video online, praising her cooking, her dedication, and her story of starting over after heartbreak. The post went viral almost immediately. Comments flooded in. "Where can we get this food? She deserves all the success. From heartbreak to boss lady. So inspiring." Chica's phone rang non-stop, notifications piling up with orders from across Lagos. The next morning, Chica sat down with a notebook, trying to organize all the orders. She realized she couldn't manage this alone. For the first time, she made a plan to expand. She hired 2 trusted staff members to help with cooking and deliveries, and rented a small, proper kitchen space where she could cook larger quantities more efficiently. Her little corner in Victoria Island had been enough to start, but now she was ready to grow. Corporate events came next. One after another, companies called to cater lunches, meetings, and parties. Chica learned quickly how to manage larger orders, how to present her dishes professionally, and how to keep her customers happy. She stayed up late at night, adjusting recipes, training her staff, and figuring out logistics, but she never complained. Every challenge was a stepping stone, every long day a lesson in resilience. Word of mouth spread just as fast as the online post. People admired her not only for her food but for her dedication and the story behind it. Chica realized that success wasn't just about talent, it was about consistency, hard work, and treating every customer with care. She began planning menus, sourcing ingredients in bulk, and even thinking about catering for weddings and bigger corporate events. From a tiny kitchen in Victoria Island to a proper workspace buzzing with activity, Chica's small hustle was transforming into a thriving business. She felt a quiet sense of pride every time she looked around her kitchen, the staff moving efficiently, orders being packed carefully, satisfied customers picking up meals. She wasn't just cooking food, she was building an empire from scratch, and it was happening faster than she had ever imagined. Late at night, after closing the kitchen, Chica sat quietly, reflecting on how far she had come. The heartbreak that had once crushed her now felt like fuel for her ambition. Every plate she served, every smile from a customer, reminded her that losing Emeka hadn't been the end, it had been the beginning of something far greater. And in that moment, Chica knew she was unstoppable. Tari walked into the high-profile Lagos party like she owned the place. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, her designer dress sparkling under the chandelier lights. She smiled, waving at friends, laughing loudly, making sure everyone noticed her presence. This was her world, the world she had built with Emeka, or at least the image of it. Every expensive bag, every luxury car, every cocktail on Instagram was meant to show that she had it all, and that she had won. But as she mingled and posed for photos, she began to hear whispers. At first, she ignored them, brushing them off as idle chatter. But the whispers grew louder, closer. "Isn't that Chica?" someone murmured. "She owns Golden Flavors now." Tari froze for a moment, her smile faltering. She turned subtly, scanning the crowd, and then she saw her. Chica, calm, composed, radiating confidence, moving through the room with an aura that demanded respect rather than envy. The panic set in slowly, then all at once. Tari's chest tightened. The carefully curated world she flaunted so proudly suddenly felt fragile, unreal, borrowed. Chica wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Golden Flavors, a name that now carried weight across Lagos, was proof of Chica's strength, her skill, and her relentless drive. Every whisper she overheard about Chica's success felt like a punch, a reminder that all the money and status in the world couldn't replace real talent and hard work. Tari's friends noticed the change in her expression. Her laughter became forced, her movements stiff. She tried to approach Chica, to act casual, but even her bravado couldn't mask the fear growing inside her. Deep down, Tari knew she had built her lifestyle on borrowed fame and empty displays. She had relied on Emika's choices, on charm, on appearances, and it had given her nothing real. Meanwhile, Chica's empire grew steadily, silently, and undeniably. Chica, on the other hand, moved gracefully through the party, acknowledging compliments and shaking hands with potential clients and partners. She had no need to flaunt her success. It spoke for itself. People admired her not just for the empire she had built, but for the journey that had brought her here. From heartbreak to triumph, from a tiny kitchen in Victoria Island to one of the most talked-about catering businesses in Lagos. Tari's panic deepened with every glance at Chica, every whispered name, every approving nod Chica received. She realized, painfully, that no amount of designer clothes or flashy cars could earn her the respect and influence Chica now commanded. The woman she had mocked, the woman she had believed she was superior to, had quietly become untouchable. By the end of the evening, Tari left the party feeling smaller than ever. Her world of glitter and glamour had not prepared her for the reality of true success. Meanwhile, Chica continued to shine, her empire growing stronger with every passing day, proof that talent, hard work, and integrity always outlast arrogance and borrowed power. Emika sat in his sleek car scrolling through his phone when a headline caught his eye. Top Female Entrepreneur of the Year, Chica Ojo of Golden Flavors. His fingers froze on the screen, his heart skipping a beat. He felt a cold knot of panic tighten in his chest. The woman he had abandoned, the woman he thought would never rise without him, was now being celebrated across Nigeria. The article showed her smiling in her new corporate kitchen, surrounded by staff, her eyes shining with pride and confidence. For a long moment, Emika sat in silence, guilt and disbelief battling in his mind. He remembered all the mornings Chica had prepared breakfast while he scrolled his phone, all the sacrifices she had made quietly, without complaint. And now, she had built something he couldn't touch, couldn't buy, and couldn't take credit for. He picked up the phone, his thumb trembling as he dialed her number. "Chica. I made a mistake," he stammered when she answered. Can we talk?" His voice was shaky, unsteady, the arrogance he once carried completely gone. Chica listened calmly, her fingers resting on the kitchen counter in her busy office. Around her, the staff moved efficiently, preparing orders for a major corporate event, but she gave him her full attention. Her voice was steady, soft yet firm. "Emika, I never needed your permission to succeed." There was a pause on the line, heavy and loaded with everything unsaid between them. Emika opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. Chica continued, "You left me thinking I couldn't make it without you. But every plate I cooked, every customer I served, every long night in that tiny kitchen taught me something far more important than money or approval. I learned my own strength." Emika's chest tightened. He realized, painfully, that his absence had never held her back. In fact, it had propelled her forward. She had taken heartbreak and turned it into fuel for her ambition, building an empire from scratch while he had relied on charm and appearances. I didn't know you'd," he trailed off, unable to finish. "I know," Chica said quietly, almost kindly, though a sharp edge of triumph lingered beneath her words. "But it's too late. I'm not waiting for anyone to validate me anymore. My life, my success, my happiness, they are mine. And nothing you say can change that." Emika sat back in his car, staring at the phone, feeling the weight of every lost opportunity, every mistake he had made. Meanwhile, Chica hung up and turned back to her team, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She had turned pain into power, betrayal into brilliance, and heartbreak into an empire. And in that moment, she knew more than ever that true strength doesn't come from begging for chances. It comes from taking them, fearlessly, with your own two hands. Emika's regret was real, sharp and bitter, but Chica's triumph was sweeter, brighter and unstoppable. She had won far more than a business award. She had won herself. The corporate launch was buzzing with energy. Lagos's elite had gathered to celebrate Chica's latest expansion, Golden Flavor's new flagship branch. The red carpet gleamed under bright lights, cameras flashed, and music pulsed through the grand hall. Chica moved gracefully through the crowd, greeting clients, partners, and journalists, her calm confidence drawing admiration from everyone around her. Every detail reflected her vision. The menu boards, the staff uniforms, even the elegant decor. It all spoke of her hard work and dedication. Tari, dressed in another designer ensemble, spotted Chica from across the room. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she made her way over, a forced smile plastered on her face. "You got lucky," she said, her tone dripping with arrogance, as if that alone could diminish Chica's achievements. A few nearby guests glanced over, curious about the tension between the two women. Chica paused, turning slowly to face her, a serene smile on her lips. Without a word, she pulled out her phone and swiped to a photo. "Lucky," she said softly, showing Tari and the crowd a picture of her thriving restaurant chain. Hundreds of employees in crisp uniforms, busy kitchens, and happy customers filling the spaces. The image captured the scale of her empire, something built from scratch, from tiny beginnings, through dedication, perseverance, and sheer talent. The crowd gasped, murmurs spreading like wildfire. People leaned in, eyes wide with admiration and shock. Some whispered, "She built all this from nothing. Look at her team, hundreds of employees." The whispers grew louder, filling the space with awe. Tari's face paled, the confident mask she had worn for so long cracking under the weight of reality. The arrogance that once seemed untouchable now looked fragile, almost ridiculous. Chica's smile widened, not out of malice, but with quiet satisfaction. "This isn't luck," she said, her voice calm but carrying the force of her journey. "This is work, consistency, and believing in yourself when no one else would." Tari opened her mouth to reply, but no words came. The crowd's attention had shifted entirely to Chica, whose presence radiated authority, competence, and respect. The room buzzed with admiration, and Tari's bravado dissolved completely. As Chica turned and continued to mingle with her guests, she felt a wave of triumph wash over her, not the kind that comes from defeating someone, but the kind that comes from proving to the world, and herself, what she was truly capable of. She had transformed pain into power, heartbreak into success, and mockery into admiration. In that room, surrounded by the people she had inspired, Chica knew one thing clearly: her empire, her dignity, and her legacy were untouchable. And for the first time, everyone could see it. Chica's life had changed completely. What had started as a tiny kitchen in Victoria Island had grown into an empire. Golden Flavors now had branches across Lagos, and she had just opened her first location in Abuja. Each restaurant reflected her attention to detail, her love for quality food, and her belief in giving her customers an unforgettable experience. The empire she had quietly built from heartbreak now stood tall and proud, visible to everyone who had ever doubted her. With her success, Chica finally moved into a luxury apartment overlooking the city. The space was modern, elegant, and filled with light, a reflection of her hard work, resilience, and taste. But more than the apartment itself, it symbolized independence and freedom. Every corner reminded her of how far she had come, from packing up her small belongings after Emika left to now having a life built entirely on her own terms. Chica didn't forget where she came from. She hired her childhood friends to work in her restaurants, giving them opportunities she knew were rare. She trained them personally, teaching them the same lessons she had learned about dedication, patience, and perseverance. Watching them grow alongside her brought a sense of fulfillment that money alone could never buy. Beyond business, Chica became a role model for young women across Nigeria. Her story, rising from betrayal and heartbreak to become a top entrepreneur, was shared on social media, in magazines, and at conferences. Young women wrote to her, sharing how inspired they were by her courage and determination. Chica spoke openly about her journey, her failures, and her successes, hoping to show them that no setback, no matter how painful, could stop someone determined to rise. Meanwhile, Emika and Tari watched from the sidelines, unable to ignore the empire Chica had built. Emika, once proud and arrogant, now felt the sting of regret. Every glance at a Golden Flavors location reminded him of what he had lost, not just a wife, but a partner whose talent and integrity outshone his charm and money. Tari, who had relied on appearances and borrowed prestige, realized too late that she had nothing real to show for her life of luxury. Their whispers and envy meant nothing in the face of Chica's authentic success. Chica, however, never gloated. She didn't need to. Her victory was measured in her freedom, her achievements, and the people she lifted along the way. She had transformed heartbreak into opportunity, betrayal into motivation, and ridicule into respect. Sitting in her office one evening, overlooking the city lights, Chica smiled quietly to herself. She had won in every way that mattered. Money, charm, and arrogance could never replace talent, perseverance, and integrity. She had proven not just to Emika and Tari, but to herself and the world, that true success comes from believing in yourself, working tirelessly, and never letting anyone else define your worth. And in that realization, Chica's triumph felt complete, powerful, and unstoppable. The room was packed with women from all walks of life, buzzing with excitement and anticipation. Chica stepped onto the stage of the Women's Entrepreneurship Summit, her posture calm and confident. The bright lights shone on her, but it wasn't her clothes or her makeup that drew attention. It was the aura of strength and determination that radiated from her. She took a deep breath, letting the energy of the crowd fill her, and began to speak. "I didn't become rich to prove him wrong," she said, her voice steady, carrying every word with sincerity. "I became rich to prove to myself that loyalty, hard work, and faith in your dreams are unstoppable." The crowd leaned in, nodding, some wiping away tears, others whispering in agreement. Every woman in the room could feel the power of her story, the heartbreak, the struggle, and the triumph that had led her here. As Chica continued, she shared stories of late nights in a tiny kitchen, of being underestimated and mocked, and of the countless obstacles she had turned into lessons. She spoke not just about success, but about resilience, about refusing to let anyone else define your worth, and about the quiet strength that comes from believing in yourself. The applause grew louder with every sentence, the energy in the room almost electric. In the back of the room, Emika stood quietly, watching. His chest tightened as regret settled deep inside him. He had once thought he could leave Chica behind, that money and charm could measure a person's worth. But now, seeing her shine so brightly, seeing the respect, admiration, and love pouring toward her from the crowd, he realized he had lost something far greater than he could ever regain. Chica's eyes scanned the audience, taking in the faces inspired by her journey. She smiled softly, knowing that every tear she had shed, every long hour she had worked, had led to this moment. Her success was no longer about heartbreak. It was about triumph, about proving that strength, integrity, and hard work could light up the world. And in that room, under those bright lights, Chica shone brighter than ever.
Thanks for watching.